It wasn't just purple. Let's get that straight from the jump. Calling the color on my front door just purple is like calling a supernova just a little bit bright. I stood on my perfectly manicured HOA-approved fescue lawn, a paintbrush dripping in my hand, and admired my handiwork. The color was a glorious, unapologetic, cosmic explosion. I'd spent a week searching for it, finally finding it at a specialty paint store under the name Nebula's Heart. It was the color of a wizard's best robe after a particularly successful spell, the color of a rare orchid found only on a forgotten mountaintop, the color you might see if you licked a poison dart frog and lived to tell the tale. It was, in a word, perfect. And in my neighborhood it was an act of war. I live in a planned community called Harmony Lakes. The name itself should have been a red flag. There's no harmony here, just a fiercely enforced state of beige. The houses are all variations on a theme, the theme being suburban ennui. We have taupe hash 4, Grage Vista, and my personal favorite, a shade of off-white called whispering wheat. The mailboxes are identical. The landscaping is regulated. The garbage cans must be out of sight by 9:01 a.m. on collection day. It's the kind of place people move to when they've given up on their dreams and decided to focus on their lawn edging. I work from home as a graphic designer, so I'm subjected to this crushing monotony 24/7. That purple door wasn't just paint, it was a scream for help. It was a singular point of vibrant, joyful chaos in a sea of soul-crushing sameness. It was my own personal declaration of independence. And, of course, it was a magnet for the Beige Inquisition. Her name was Carol, and she was the president of our homeowners association. Carol didn't walk. She advanced. She moved through the neighborhood with the gravitational pull of a dying star, sucking all joy and spontaneity into the vortex of her beige pantsuit. She had hair that looked like it had been sculpted by a terrified bonsai artist, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, which were constantly scanning for violations. A blade of grass too high? A misplaced garden gnome? A flag flown on a non-approved holiday? Carol saw all. I saw her tactical advance begin from 2 houses down. She was doing her afternoon patrol, clipboard in hand. I pretended to be deeply invested in cleaning my brush, hoping she might pass by. No such luck. Her sensible walking shoes crunched to a halt on the sidewalk bordering my property. "Leo!" she called out, her voice a finely tuned instrument of passive aggression. "Making some changes, I see." I turned, forcing a smile so wide it made my cheeks ache. "Carol, just adding a splash of color. Felt the place needed a little personality." She took a slow, deliberate step onto my lawn, a clear breach of protocol, as she was technically trespassing, but I knew better than to point that out. She tilted her head, her gaze fixed on the glorious purple rectangle. "It's very bold." In Carol speak, bold was a 4-letter word. It was code for hideous, non-compliant, and an affront to God and the Harmony Lakes Covenant. "Thanks," I said, my voice dripping with faux sincerity. "I was going for bold. I think it really sings, you know? It's a baritone, I reckon. A deep, confident baritone that says, 'Hello, world, I am a door of distinction.'" Carol's smile tightened. It was a terrifying sight, like watching a sinkhole form in slow motion. "It's just that the bylaws have a list of pre-approved harmonious colors, Leo, to maintain the aesthetic integrity of the community." "Is this one not harmonious?" I asked, gesturing to Nebula's heart with my brush. "I feel a great sense of inner harmony just looking at it. All my chakras are aligning." "I'll have to consult the covenant," she said, the 3 deadliest words in the HOA lexicon. "We wouldn't want any misunderstandings." She gave the door one last look of utter revulsion, turned on her heel, and continued her patrol, leaving a palpable chill in the summer air. I knew what was coming. 2 days later, it arrived. Tucked under my non-regulation welcome mat was a pristine white envelope. Inside, nestled in a protective plastic sleeve, was the official violation notice. The woman had laminated it. Laminated. You don't laminate a friendly reminder, you laminate a threat. You laminate something to ensure it can survive the apocalypse, just in case the cockroaches that inherit the earth need to know my door color was unapproved in the year 2025. I took the letter inside, placed it on my kitchen counter, and read it as if it were a sacred text from a lost civilization of killjoys. Harmony Lakes Homeowners Association. Official notice of covenant violation. Date, September 7th, 2025. To Leo Maxwell, 124 Primrose Path. From the Architectural Review Committee. Violation, Article 4, Section 2, A. Exterior Finishes. The color of the front entry door has been altered to a non-approved shade. Purple, unspecified, vibrant. This color is not in keeping with the established palette designed to maintain neighborhood aesthetic uniformity and property values. Action required. Repaint the front door to an approved color from the Harmony Lakes palette. See attached swatch list: Whispering Wheat, Gentle Fawn, Silent Storm, Manatee Gray. Deadline for compliance: 14 days from the date of this notice. Penalty for non-compliance. A fine of $50 per day will be levied until the violation is rectified. The sheer audacity of it all. Purple, unspecified, vibrant. They made it sound like a communicable disease. Aesthetic uniformity. That was the fancy term for the crushing boot of conformity on the neck of individual expression. This wasn't a neighborhood. It was a cult of beige. I looked from the laminated letter to my beautiful door, shimmering in the afternoon sun. I could have just repainted it. It would have been the easy thing to do. Slap a coat of manatee gray on it, and call it a day. Go back to my quiet life. But something inside me snapped. It was the lamination. It was the sheer, unadulterated pettiness of it all. This was no longer about a bucket of paint. This was about principle. This was about freedom. This was a war. And I had absolutely no intention of surrendering. A slow, mischievous, and probably slightly unhinged grin spread across my face. She wanted me to change my entrance. Fine. I would change my entrance. She wanted a harmonious, compliant door. No problem. But she never specified how that door should work. The gears in my designer brain started turning, clicking and whirring, fueled by pure, high-octane spite. Oh, I'd give her a compliant door. I'd give her a door so compliant it would circle all the way back around to being the most gloriously non-compliant thing this neighborhood had ever seen. The idea began to form, hazy at first, then sharpening into beautiful, crystal-clear focus. A secret, a trick, something from another era, something from the 1920s. The first casualty of war is sanity. My sanity was already packing its bags, but before it left, it insisted I call my best friend Dave. Dave is an accountant. His entire life is a symphony of spreadsheets and sensible decisions. He's the voice of reason I keep on retainer specifically for moments like this, when my own inner monologue starts sounding like a mad scientist cackling during a thunderstorm. I called him, putting the phone on speaker as I paced my living room, the laminated letter clutched in my hand like a holy relic. "You're not going to believe this," I started, skipping the pleasantries. "Carol laminated the HOA violation." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low whistle. Laminated? Wow, that's next level. That's like a mob boss leaving a horse head in your bed, but for suburbanites. Exactly. It's a declaration of war, Dave. A glossy, waterproof declaration of war. I have 14 days to repaint my door or face a daily fine. So just paint it beige, he said, his voice laced with the infuriating logic of a man who willingly chose to do math for a living. It's a door, man. Pick your battles. Don't die on this hill. It's not a hill, Dave. It's Mount Everest. It's about the principle of the thing. I stopped pacing and stared out the window at Carol's house, where she was now meticulously trimming a hedge with what looked like surgical scissors. She wants to crush my spirit. She wants to turn my one beacon of joy into another monument to mediocrity. I can't let her win. Okay, fine, Che Guevara. What's the grand revolutionary plan? You gonna paint it a slightly different, unapproved shade of purple out of protest? That'll really show her. No, you're thinking small. You're thinking in 2 dimensions. We need to go bigger. We need to go structural. I could hear the excitement rising in my own voice. I'm going to comply with the letter of the law, while simultaneously violating its spirit in a way so profound it will break her beige-loving brain. Dave sighed. It was the sound of a man who had heard this kind of talk from me before. All right, I'm scared, but I'm listening. What are you planning, Leo? I'm going to get rid of the purple door entirely, I said, pausing for dramatic effect. And I'm going to replace it with a new entrance. One that is, on the outside, the most boring HOA-approved color you've ever seen, but it won't be a door. What will it be? He asked, his curiosity finally piqued. It'll be a bookshelf. Silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his accountant's brain, the numbers not adding up. A bookshelf? On your front porch, how do you get in? That's the beauty of it, my friend, I said, grinning like an idiot. The bookshelf is the door, a secret entrance, a speakeasy door, like in the old gangster movies. One minute it's a respectable, taupe-colored bookshelf, fulfilling my civic duty to be as boring as possible. The next, a book is tilted, a secret latch is sprung, and voila, welcome to my home. The silence on the other end stretched for a solid 10 seconds. I was worried I had finally broken him. Then, a small chuckle erupted, growing into a full-blown wheezing laugh. You are a complete and utter madman, he finally managed to say between gasps. It's the stupidest, most brilliant, most unnecessarily complicated act of petty revenge I've ever heard of. You absolutely have to do it. Vindication. That was all I needed. With Dave's blessing, my descent into madness was complete. That night, I dove headfirst into the internet, a man on a mission. My search history was a thing of beauty. Custom secret door builders. How to build a bookshelf door. Carpenters specializing in weaponized architecture. Contractors with a flexible moral compass and experience in historical spite projects. Most of what I found was depressing. Slick, corporate websites with stock photos of smiling families and bland testimonials. Trim tech solutions made our crown molding dreams come true. No, these people wouldn't understand. They were part of the beige machine. They would try to talk me into something sensible. I needed an artisan, a maverick, a craftsman who would hear my story and see not a problem client, but a kindred spirit. After hours of scrolling through digital mediocrity, I found it. The website looked like it had been designed in 1998 on a computer running Windows 95. It had a tiled background of a wood grain pattern and used the Comic Sans font, unironically. The name of the business was Sal's Custom Woodworks, and the motto, blinking in glorious yellow text, sealed the deal. If it's wood and you can think of it, I can build it. No job too weird. This was my guy. I clicked on the Contact Us page. There was no email form, just a picture of a grizzled-looking man with sawdust in his eyebrows and a phone number. I took a deep breath and made the call. A gravelly voice answered on the second ring. Sal's. Hi, I stammered, suddenly feeling ridiculous. My name is Leo. I found your website. I have a weird job. Kid, you found my website. Of course it's a weird job. The normal ones call the guys with the fancy vans. What do you need? A wooden submarine? A life-size giraffe rocking horse? I've done both. I need a secret door, I blurted out. A bookshelf for my front entrance. There was a pause. I heard what sounded like him taking a long drag from a cigarette. A speakeasy door, huh? Haven't gotten one of those in a while. You in trouble with the feds? Worse, I said. The HOA? I heard a deep, rumbling chuckle from the other end of the line. Say no more. I'll be there tomorrow at 10. And kid, don't you dare touch that purple door. I gotta see what started all this. The next morning at exactly 9:59 a.m., a beat-up Ford F-150 that looked like it had personally survived several wars rumbled to a stop in front of my house. A man who could only be Sal emerged from the driver's side. He was in his 60s, built like a brick wall, with a face that looked like it had been carved from oak and left out in the sun for a few decades. He had sawdust in his eyebrows, just like in the picture, and a pencil permanently lodged behind his ear. He wasn't carrying a clipboard or an iPad. He was carrying a stained, old-school thermos. He took one look at my house, his eyes immediately landing on the glorious purple door. He nodded slowly, a look of profound understanding on his face. He walked up the path, stuck out a calloused hand that felt like a bundle of hardwood, and said, "Sal, so that's the door that started it all." "Leo," I replied, shaking his hand, "in all its non-compliant glory." "It's beautiful," he said, his voice a low rumble of approval. "Hate to see it go, but from what you said on the phone, the cause is just—" I invited him in, but he just shook his head. "Nah, let's stay out here. The battlefield." "So the wife on the phone, that was you, right? Said you wanted a bookshelf for your porch." "Not just a bookshelf," I clarified, feeling the excitement bubble up again. "A secret entrance. The bookshelf is the door." He stared at me with an expressionless gaze, sizing me up. "Why?" It was the ultimate test. I didn't give him a long explanation. I simply walked back into my house, retrieved the laminated violation notice from the kitchen counter, and handed it to him. He took the letter. His eyes scanned the official letterhead, the jargon-filled text, the list of offensively boring color swatches. He looked at the violation. Purple, unspecified, vibrant, and then back at my door. A slow, magnificent grin spread across his face, cracking the stoic facade like a fault line. It was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. "I hate these people," he said, a newfound warmth in his voice. He handed the letter back to me. "Okay, kid, I'm in. This isn't a job, it's a public service. Let's talk specifics." And just like that, we were partners in crime. An unholy alliance of a sarcastic graphic designer and a woodworking curmudgeon united against the forces of beige. We spent the next hour on my porch, sketching plans on a scrap piece of plywood he pulled from the back of his truck. He was a genius. He immediately understood that this couldn't just be a gag, it had to be a fortress. "You'll want a steel-reinforced frame," he declared, his pencil flying across the wood. "These HOA types, they push. You gotta be ready for them to push back. We'll use solid oak for the shelves. Give it some real heft. A classic pivot hinge rated for 500 pounds. Overkill is underrated, kid." "What about the lock?" I asked. "How do we trigger it?" "Options," he said, his eyes gleaming. "We can do a fake book lever, classic. A little cliché, maybe. We could do a hidden button under one of the shelves, or—" He leaned in conspiratorially. "We get fancy. We can install a secret knock sensor. You program a specific rhythm, it unlocks the solenoid. A little knock, 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 pause, knock, knock, like a real speakeasy." We settled on the book lever. It felt more tactile, more satisfying. We debated which book to use. I suggested Fahrenheit and 451 or 1984 for the symbolic value. Sal grunted. 2 on the nose. We use their own weapon against them. He scribbled on the plywood. We hollow out a copy of the Harmony Lakes HOA bylaws and covenant. The trigger will be inside. Poetic justice. The man was a poet. A week later, demolition day arrived. The first step was the most painful. Removing my beautiful purple door. As Sal took a crowbar to the frame, I swear I heard a tiny, mournful violin playing. I saw Carol's face appear in her window, a look of smug satisfaction spreading across it. Her victory was at hand. Little did she know, it was merely the end of the beginning. Construction was a symphony of chaos. Sal worked with a focused, old-world precision that was mesmerizing to watch. I, on the other hand, served as his completely useless but highly enthusiastic apprentice. "Kid, hold this level," he'd grunt. I'd hold it upside down. "Kid, fetch me the Phillips head." I'd bring him a hammer. "Kid, you're holding that 2x4 like it's a bag of kittens. Put some back into it." "I'm a designer, Sal," I'd protest, covered in a fine layer of sawdust. "My muscles are designed for precise mouse clicking and keyboard shortcuts, not for lifting heavy objects." He'd just shake his head and mutter something about kids today, but there was a twinkle in his eye. I think he enjoyed the company. As the heavy steel frame went in and the thick oak structure took shape, Carol's surveillance state went into full effect. Her patrols became more frequent. She'd walk by slowly, pretending to admire the petunias on the other side of the street, while blatantly taking pictures with her phone. One afternoon, she cornered me while I was helping Sal measure a plank. "That's an awfully thick doorframe you're installing, Leo," she said, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Security, Carol," I replied, with my most charming smile. "You can never be too safe these days. Plus, I've been getting really into reading lately. Decided to build a little free library right on my porch. You know, for the community." "A library," she repeated flatly, her gaze sweeping over the massive, over-engineered structure. "On your porch, with a steel frame, right?" She didn't believe me for a second, but she couldn't find the rule against it. I could practically see the smoke coming out of her ears as she tried to cross-reference my project with her mental encyclopedia of bylaws. The bookshelf itself was the final piece of the puzzle. We assembled it on the lawn, a monument of solid oak. Then came the most soul-crushing part, the painting. We opened a can of HOA-approved taupe hash 27. It was the color of sadness, the color of a rainy Tuesday afternoon in a dentist's waiting room. It was the most boring color I had ever seen. "It hurts, Sal," I said, dipping the roller into the tray of beige sludge. "It physically hurts." "It's camouflage, kid," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "The ugliest Trojan horse in history." Once it was installed, it was a masterpiece. From the street, it looked like an innocuous, if slightly overbuilt, bookshelf. It was offensively dull. It blended in perfectly. But we knew its secret. Sal showed me how to tilt the hollowed-out HOA bylaws book, just so. How to listen for the faint click of the magnetic lock disengaging. How a gentle push would make the entire 300-pound unit swing inward as smoothly and silently as a ghost. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. A taupe monument to glorious, weaponized defiance. Sal wasn't just a contractor, he was the Michelangelo of malicious compliance. The project was nearing completion, but the final stage involved the most delicate work, wiring the low-voltage electronic lock and the motion-activated LED reading light Sal had insisted upon for authenticity. This process, for some reason, involved a series of loud, intermittent beeps. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, a time when most of the neighborhood was at work. But Carol, ever vigilant, was not. The beeping, apparently, was the final straw. It was the sound that pushed her over the edge from nosy neighbor to full-blown informant for the suburban Gestapo. I was holding a bundle of wires while Sal fiddled with the solenoid when I saw it. The slow, majestic cruise of a police car turning onto our street. It glided to a stop directly in front of my house. My heart did a little tap dance against my ribs. This was an escalation I hadn't anticipated. 2 officers got out. The first was the archetype of the cynical, seen-it-all veteran cop. He had a magnificent mustache and a weary look in his eyes that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. His name tag read Miller. The second was much younger, bright-eyed, and looked like he was genuinely intrigued by the suburban drama unfolding before him. His name tag read Davis. Officer Miller approached with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who was paid by the hour. "Afternoon, sir," he said, his voice a tired monotone. "We received a call about a disturbance. Something about illicit construction?" He said the words illicit construction as if they tasted bad. "Illicit? No, sir," I said, trying to sound as innocent as possible. "This is a passion project, a community library, just doing some wiring for the lighting." Right on cue, Carol marched across her lawn, clipboard in hand, looking like a general arriving to survey a battle. "He's lying, officer," she declared, pointing an accusatory finger at my beautiful bookshelf. "He's been building this fortified structure for weeks. It's not up to code. There are strange noises. It's a public nuisance." Officer Davis, the younger one, walked up to the porch and gave the bookshelf a curious inspection. He ran his hand over the smooth, taupe-painted oak. "It's a bookshelf, ma'am," he said, a hint of confusion in his voice. "But it's suspicious," Carol insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "Look at the hinges, and there are wires." Sal, who had been silent until now, wiped his hands on a rag and stepped forward. He looked Officer Miller dead in the eye. "It's for the motion-activated reading light," he said in his gravelly voice, without a hint of irony. "ADA compliance. Gotta make sure our literature is accessible to everyone." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Sal was a genius. Officer Miller let out a long, suffering sigh. It was the sigh of a man who had dealt with 1,000 Carols in his long career. "Sir," he said, turning to me, "is your project permitted?" This was the moment Sal had prepared me for. I calmly walked inside, retrieved the building permit Sal had insisted we get, filed under custom entryway installation, and handed it to the officer. Miller scanned the document. Everything was perfectly, infuriatingly legal. He handed the permit back to me. "Everything seems to be in order here." He then turned to Carol. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter. It appears to be a dispute between you and your neighbor. As long as they're not breaking any laws, there's nothing we can do." Carol sputtered, her face turning a shade of red that was definitely not on the HOA-approved color palette. As Miller was turning to leave, Officer Davis leaned in close to me, shielding his mouth with his hand. "A speakeasy door?" he whispered, a wide grin spreading across his face. "My grandpa had one of these in his basement. That's awesome. Nice." He gave me a quick wink before following his partner back to the car. As they drove away, Miller gave me a subtle nod of what I could only interpret as world-weary respect. Carol was left standing on my lawn, fuming, defeated, her authority completely undermined. It was a glorious moment. The story of the police being called on the suspicious library spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Suddenly, my petty feud was the talk of Harmony Lakes. The community, once a monolithic block of beige, fractured into factions. A neighborhood civil war had begun. Mr. Henderson, my elderly neighbor to the left, who was engaged in a long-running, silent war with Carol over the height of his prize-winning tomatoes, became my staunchest ally. The evening after the police incident, he shuffled over with a six-pack of craft beer. "Saw the commotion," he said, handing me the beer. "Stick it to her, son. She told me last week my bird bath was aesthetically disruptive." Others, however, sided with their queen. Mrs. Gable from across the street, a staunch Carol loyalist, began glaring at me every time I went to get my mail. I started getting anonymous notes left inside the little free library, which Sal and I had now stocked with a single, pristine copy of the HOA bylaws and a rotating selection of pulp fiction novels. One note, written in frantic cursive, simply said, "Conform." The project was almost done, but the universe decided to throw one last obstacle in our path. The weather turned. Dark clouds gathered, and a torrential rainstorm of biblical proportions descended upon Harmony Lakes. And with the rain came the discovery of a small, insidious leak in the weatherproofing seal around the top of the bookshelf frame. A tiny, steady drip of water began to appear on my new hardwood threshold. It was a moment of near despair. Sal and I were out there in the pouring rain, soaked to the bone, wrestling with a giant blue tarp. I could see Carol's silhouette in her window, watching us, a triumphant smile no doubt gracing her lips. For a brief dark moment I thought, maybe she won. Maybe the forces of beige are just too powerful. Then Sal, his gray hair plastered to his skull, handed me a caulking gun. "Less moping, more sealing, kid," he yelled over the sound of the thunder. "You think the guys who built the pyramids quit because of a little rain?" And just like that, the revolutionary spirit was back. We were going to win this war, one tube of caulk at a time. After the Great Flood, the skies cleared, and the final touches were applied. The leak was sealed, the paint was touched up, and the last of the fake, glued-down books were arranged on the shelves. The only one that moved was our trigger, the thick, imposing copy of the Harmony Lakes HOA bylaws and covenant. It was perfect. The door was done. Sal gave me the final walkthrough. He showed me how to apply just the right amount of pressure to the spine of the bylaws book, how to listen for the soft, satisfying thunk of the electronic bolt retracting. He demonstrated the peephole, a tiny brass slider hidden in the spine of a fake book titled The Joy of Conformity. It was his own little addition, a stroke of pure comedic genius. "Now, for security," he said, his face dead serious. "You need a password. Someone slides open the peephole, you don't open up unless they give the password." "What's the password?" I asked. "Swordfish," he said, without a hint of a smile. I wasn't sure if he was referencing the old Marx Brothers movie or the terrible Hugh Jackman film, and I was too afraid to ask. We shook hands on the porch. I handed him the final check, which felt wholly inadequate for the masterpiece of spite he had constructed. "Kid," Sal said, tucking the check into his flannel shirt pocket, "this has been the most fun I've had on a job in 20 years. Seriously, it's been an honor. If you ever decide to build a moat and a working drawbridge, you call me first." He gave me a wink, climbed into his ancient truck, and rumbled off down the street, leaving me alone with my magnificent, monstrous creation. That Friday, I decided it was time for the grand opening. I invited Dave and a couple of other close friends over, telling them only that I had a new home improvement project to show them. When they arrived, I met them on the porch. "All right, what's this big secret?" asked my friend Maria, looking around. "Did you get a new welcome mat?" "Better," I said, gesturing proudly to the bookshelf. "My new front door." They stared at it, then back at me. Dave, who was in on the joke, was fighting to keep a straight face. "It's a bookshelf, Leo," said another friend, Mark. Did you hit your head? How do we get in?" "That's for you to figure out," I said, crossing my arms. What followed was 10 minutes of pure, unadulterated slapstick comedy. They knocked on it. They tried to pull on the shelves. Mark, convinced it was a puzzle, started trying to arrange the glued-down books in alphabetical order. Maria tried to find a hidden button, patting down the entire structure like a TSA agent. Dave finally took pity on them. "Think like a gangster," he advised. Finally, I showed them the trick. I reached for the HOA bylaws, tilted the spine downwards, and with a gentle push, the entire bookshelf swung inwards with a quiet whoosh, revealing the brightly lit entryway to my house. The reaction was instantaneous and beautiful. A moment of stunned silence, followed by a collective eruption of laughter. They poured into the house, absolutely losing their minds. For the next 10 minutes, they were like kids with a new toy, taking turns opening and closing the door, marveling at the sheer, glorious absurdity of it all. The sound of our muffled laughter and repeated exclamations of "No way!" was apparently too much for the queen of beige to bear. We were inside, debating the merits of different secret passwords, when a powerful beam of light cut through the living room window. We all froze. It was Carol. She was marching across my lawn like a woman possessed. A heavy-duty flashlight in one hand and her phone, recording in the other. Dave, who had just gone back out onto the porch to test the door one more time, scrambled back inside as she approached. "Red alert! The fun police are here," he hissed. Swinging the heavy door shut behind him, we heard a loud, insistent banging on the solid oak of the bookshelf. "I've got you, Leo!" Carol's shrill voice cut through the wood. "I knew it! This is an unapproved gathering, and what is this thing? It's a fire hazard. It's a structural violation. I'm calling the fire marshal. I'm calling the city inspector." My friends looked at me, wide-eyed. I put a finger to my lips, signaling for silence, and a wicked grin spread across my face. I crept to the door and slid open the tiny, hidden peephole. All I could see was an enraged eyeball and the lens of her iPhone. "Password?" I whispered. The banging stopped. "What did you say? Open this wall unit right now." I motioned for my friends to act casual. I grabbed a plate of cheese and crackers from the kitchen counter. Then, taking a deep breath, I swung the entire bookshelf inward. The sight that greeted her was one of pure, anticlimactic normalcy. There I was, holding a platter of appetizers. My friends were sitting on the couch, looking up at her with expressions of mild confusion. The entryway was well lit, clean, and utterly ordinary. "Carol," I said, my voice dripping with fake concern. "Can I help you? You were banging so loud I thought there was an emergency. Did you want to borrow a book?" I gestured with my head towards the bookshelf door. "We've only got the one right now, but I hear it's a real page-turner." She was completely, utterly speechless. Her brain, so finely tuned to identify clear-cut violations, could not process what it was seeing. She lowered her phone, her mouth slightly agape. She pointed a trembling finger at the door, then at the empty space where it had just been, then back again. Her entire reality was short-circuiting. Feeling a surge of what could have been pity, but was probably just a desire to rub it in, I gave her the full demonstration. "Oh, this thing. It's just my new door, see?" I gently swung the massive bookshelf shut. It closed with a solid, satisfying thump. It was a bookshelf again. Then I tilted the bylaws and swung it back open. It was a door again. Bookshelf door, bookshelf door. Carol stared, her face a blank canvas of baffled rage. She had nothing. There was no rule in her laminated holy book for this. A bookshelf was permitted on a porch. A door of an approved color was permitted. There was no clause, no subsection, no addendum that covered a door being a bookshelf. She had been outmaneuvered, not by breaking the rules, but by following them in the most ridiculously creative way imaginable. Without another word, she turned. She didn't storm off, she didn't yell, she just retreated. A slow, silent, utterly defeated walk back to her beige house. It was a victory more total and complete than any shouting match could have ever provided. In the aftermath, life in Harmony Lakes found a new, quieter rhythm. Carol never spoke to me again. She wouldn't even make eye contact when we passed on the street. It was the greatest gift she could have ever given me. My speakeasy door became a quiet legend. Mr. Henderson would sometimes bring his grandkids over, and I'd let them open it, their eyes wide with wonder. Officer Davis waved every time he drove by my street. I kept the door. It was a hassle sometimes, sure. Getting pizza deliveries required a complex set of instructions, but I wouldn't have changed a thing. I looked at my unique, absurd, taupe-colored entryway, a $10,000 monument to a battle I never wanted to fight, but was damn glad I won. All this because she hated my purple door. And as I settled onto my couch that night with my friends, the laughter finally dying down, I raised my glass. Some people fight the system with protests and petitions. I just gave it a secret entrance, and you know what? It was worth every single penny.